On today's episode of Locked On 76ers, it's time to dive into some of the 2022 draft prospects. We jump in on Jalen Williams, E.J. Liddell next, right here on Locked On 76ers.
You are Locked On 76ers, your daily Philadelphia 76ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, you are Locked On 76ers. I'm Devon Gibbons from 97.5 The Fanatic Radio in Philadelphia alongside my co-host and partner, Keith Pompey, Sixers beat writer for the Inquirer.com. What's up, Keith?
What's good, D? How you been, man?
Oh, man, I've been good. We got to get into some of these draft prospects. But first, before we start off, we got to thank everybody for making Locked On 76ers your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On 76ers is free and available on all platforms, including right here on YouTube at Locked On 76ers. Well, man, listen, it's time to start to dive into some of these younger players that might be available around pick number 23 for the 76ers. And listen, they've had some success the last couple of seasons, at least with Matisse Thybulle and Tyrese Maxey. We're still awaiting last year's draft selection at pick number 28. Out of Tennessee, Jaden Springer spent a lot of time with the G League team, the Delaware Bluecoats, and Doc Rivers at the end of the season said that he feels like defensively he may be ready next season. The offense, of course, has to catch up a little bit and has the ability, has the prospect maybe of being a really, really good defender when it's all said and done. We didn't see much of them last year, but here they are again, Keith, a really good team. So you pick in the 20s, and in the 20s at pick number 23, another opportunity to add a player. First off, we wanted to talk about Jalen Williams from Santa Clara, 6'6", player, 6'7", really started to skyrocket in the draft, man. He was projected early on when the season was done collegiately that he would be somewhere towards the end of the first round. Now, man, we're seeing him in the mix somewhere in the late teens all the way to the Sixers at 23. What do you think about him and specifically what the team needs, as we've talked about quite a bit in this draft?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about him is I think that he's a guy who, like you pinpointed, he was a dude who could have been a second-round pick, maybe 28, 20-something. Now he's in the teens, this and that. But a lot of that's based off of what he did at the NBA draft combine. Like he's actually without his shoes. I know they play ball in their sneakers, right? But he's 6'4.5", but he has a 7'2" and a quarter-inch wingspan, right? He has a 39-inch vertical, but then his standing vertical, when you just stand and just jump up, is 33.5. So a guy like that, people look at his athleticism, they look at his length, they also look at his ability to take people off the dribble. So he's a riser. And when people think of this guy, they don't want to say, okay, are we going to be the guy that slept on like a Donovan Mitchell who went 13th in the 2017 draft because of a lot of people didn't know he could do it, but he had the same similar measurables to this guy, Jalen Williams. So that's why he's rising, right? Now, the thing is, when you ask yourself about him, and we have to be honest with ourselves, even though he has these great measurables, is he going to be able to be a guy who can catapult the Sixers to the championship? Because that's what their next piece has to be, a guy who's going to come out here and thrive and do certain things. So, yes, if this was a young team, you would say like, okay, this is a building block. But right now, is he the piece that's going to be needed, an improving piece, and the way he is needed to get you to a championship? Because yes, the Sixers do need a versatile wing, and he could be that versatile wing. He can score, he could pass, he has the length. He needs to work on his lateral movement a little bit more. And he has, even though he's long, smaller guards have had an ability to blow by him at Santa Clara. So there are certain things that he needs to work on. But he has all the measurables. and people don't want him to be the next Donovan Mitchell, and you were the team that passed up on him. So that's what the Sixers have to think long and hard about.
And with a player like him, to your point, especially with some of the things that needs to work on, whether even with his body potentially of tightening up a little bit, toning it up a little bit, and the lateral movement, those are the things that now we talk about with all kinds of prospects when they come into the NBA. That just needs to be their job. No longer is it college athlete, and a student athlete, and going out there and playing these games and all that they do. But once you get to the NBA, he's probably going to benefit from being in an NBA situation where he's around the weight room all the time, all the drills that they put him through, because the talent is there clearly for him to be a first-round pick. The way he has moved up now in these mock drafts and potentially in the eyes of the scouts and the execs of what he could do, but he does fit the bill of the wing position that you talk about with that 6'6" frame. And being able to move and putting the ball on the floor is going to be crucial, because that's one thing that we talk about with a lot of these wings that the Sixers do have here outside of Tobias Harris. and you look at Matisse Thybulle and George Niang and some of the others. And the one question that we have, can you put the basketball on the floor? And that would be something that he would have to be able to do with this basketball team. Putting the ball on the floor, create shot opportunities, because these NBA players, the opponents, they're going to try to make you prove yourself. And when you have double teams going the way of Embiid and Harden and maybe some of the better defenders on Harris and Maxey, he's going to have to be able to take advantage of a situation with whatever defender is on him and not be a negative out there on the offensive end. So an intriguing prospect for sure, and fits the bill once again as a wing player for the 76ers. And the next one we need to talk about is another wing player, an older player, a junior at Ohio State, E.J. Liddell. I like him. I really do. We'll talk about him a little bit on the other side if he's available for the 76ers. We'll discuss what fit he may have with this team right here next on Locked On 76ers. That's on you. You got the pick.
Yeah. Let's talk about PrizePicks, right? Before we talk about the E.J. Liddell. Listen, all right, NBA fans, you are looking for a daily fantasy option for the NBA. Then you need to try the award-winning app PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I love this, and we know you will too. It's easy to use. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under of their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected number. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawal. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. PrizePicks offers any props you can think of, from points scored to rebounds to steals, right? For a limited time, PrizePicks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. Users get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. But you must use the code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On fans. Sign up today and use the code NBA, $50 for free, if a player in your PrizePicks entry scores a single point.
Thank you for making Locked On 76ers your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NBA game. Of course, right now, only the NBA Finals with analysis from our local experts is free and available wherever you get your podcast. And we'll talk about the NBA Finals a little bit later. But Keith, right now, we need to talk about another intriguing prospect, and that is E.J. Liddell from the Ohio State Buckeyes, 6'6", 6'7", maybe, and maybe, you want to look at it that way. He declared a season ago to see what his draft standing was at the time, get some feedback, get some information, decided to go back to school. And some of the things that the NBA did, in fact, want to see from him was to go out there and simply improve on some of his game. As an example, to be able to put the ball on the floor a little bit more, to be able to shoot the basketball a little bit better. They tighten up on a few things. Standing at 6'6", 6'7", he has a body, man, that can take on some of the pounding on the low block. And in the NBA, while he may be able to do that, he's also going to have to be able to use his handle and use the bounce to get to some of the places with some of these more athletic fours that they have in the NBA, guys at the 5 that can move. He's going to be somewhere in that I think, at least for sure, a 4. Can he play some 3 sometimes? Can he bang in some of the smaller lineups as well? He isn't a decent passer who can move the ball around just, simple enough to get to where it needs to be. He's not going to be a necessary initiator of the offense, if you will, with what they do, but he has defensive versatility. He can move around quite a bit. I like the fact that with him, he has one of those weird games where you look at him and you say, oh, he kind of has like a little old man situation in him. Not like a little bit like George Niang in that sense where you term it that way, but the way he does it with the basketball, with his handle, and being able to do things like that, take guys off the dribble with the bounce, and again, just have that old man type of game, but has some wiggle to it too, some more modern game to him. I like him. It's intriguing. Again, last season I believe he averaged 19 points per game, 8 rebounds, and 2.5 assists at Ohio State. And he was really good. And he shot 37% from 3, which is something that the NBA wanted him to improve on. He's a 76% free throw shooter. So he gets to the foul line, he can make his free throws. And he's sitting at 240, a Belleville, Illinois kid. So, there's some toughness in there coming from that area, a 50% shooter from the field overall. There's just simply things to like. And with him coming in as an older player, Keith, he can fit in maybe and give you some good minutes as a young player if, in fact, Doc Rivers would give him an opportunity. And I think he would be able to go out there on the floor and hold his own in the NBA. The quickness, to your point, the lateral movement, all that stuff, that's going to have to work itself out, just similar to what you just spoke about with Williams. He's a team player, Keith. He's one of those guys that's a team player. I can see him having a game where maybe he goes off in the fourth quarter, not necessarily and gets having an 8-0 run, but during the stretch of whatever he's on the floor with, whomever he's on the floor with, I could see Liddell as one of those players that can, during that stretch where they may, as a team, have a 10-0 run, he'll score 6 of those 10 during that run because he has that type of game in him. He has a good feel for the game, a little bit of a guy who caught on real late as far as the game goes in general, where really garnering all the attention that he's getting. This is a player that I like. And I quite frankly, I don't think he's going to be there because I think others, executives and teams, they see what we're talking about here and his ability, the possibility of him being a guy who can contribute, especially on a team that late in the lottery, and of course, as you get into the later teens, and most certainly in the 20s, playoff teams that can just use guys that they like that played a little bit in college. They are 21, 22 years of age, but you feel like you can count on them. You have to teach them stuff, but they've already been taught because they've seen things in college basketball already. And I think Liddell fits that bill of one of those players. Versatile, can do things on the low block, improved shooter, does hustle, doesn't quit. And that's what I see in him. And I could see him as a fit coming off the Sixers bench even as a young player, forcing Doc Rivers' hand a little bit to give him a little bit of a run and see what he can do out there on the floor. So that's my observation for E.J. Liddell. That's my scouting report, if you will. And I think I think that he can do that.
Yeah. Can I ask you a couple questions about him?
Yeah.
Like listening to you and then, looking him up and seeing certain things. Does he put you in mind of Grant Williams? And reason why I'm saying that is we're talking about an older guy, right? Grant Williams is 6'6", about 236. He was drafted by the Celtics with the 22nd overall pick in the 2019 draft. and he comes, he's not he's a good player, but he's not a starter in this league. And he'll come in and can give you, some depth off the bench and do certain things. Does he put you in mind of that type of player?
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Not necessarily the game, but just more so body type. He's a little bit more stocky, I guess you will, Grant Williams. But even at 240 for Liddell here, I think he has a good body. And I think he has a better handle, and just from the stuff that I've seen from E.J. Liddell. And not to say that Grant Williams can't put the ball on the floor, because he can, but he generally likes to turn his back and put his back to the basket on his defender and do some of that. Grant Williams, we've seen where he has already had a career game in the postseason. Pardon me. I believe it was 7 threes in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't know that E.J. Liddell has that in him to turn into that, but what I do know is that he will work, and he will work to improve. So 22 for Grant Williams. Let's say Liddell does fall to 23 to the Sixers. That's a really good comparison. And like Williams in his earlier years, coming off the bench for the Celtics, maybe a spot duty for Liddell at some point with whatever team, specifically here for the Sixers. But coming in right away, no. But someone that I think if the coach gives him an opportunity, he will earn that coach's trust and his teammates as well. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And so those are two right there. We'll start to do these a little bit more as we get closer to the draft. Now, 8 days away for the 76ers, where they have the 23rd overall pick. And that's courtesy of the Brooklyn Nets deferring it back. We'll get into some more draft prospects. But on our next segment here coming up, Keith and I need to talk about Game 5 in San Francisco as the Golden State Warriors and the Boston Celtics went at it. We'll talk about the results, what it means for Game 6 that's coming up right here, Locked On 76ers.
Before we do that, we need to talk about BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports development news and odds, including this year's NBA Finals, the NHL Finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Well, Keith, the game started in San Francisco on Monday night, and Golden State, they got the better of the Boston Celtics in game number 5. Oftentimes, we talked about it during the postseason, the team that wins game 5, they're in a really good spot, of course, with 2 of the last 3 games. They need to win 1 in the last 2, and chances are that happens with the team that wins games 5. Now, we're headed back to Boston. Golden State is up 3-2. And look, sometimes in the NBA Finals and in the playoffs in general, we spoke about Grant Williams having one of those big games in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Milwaukee Bucks. Well, you need other players to step up and help out the stars who have been carrying you. And Steph Curry, for my money right now, if Golden State wins this series, he's going to be the NBA Finals MVP. But you also need others to do their part. And I think the second most consistent player for the Golden State Warriors has been Andrew Wiggins. And for Wiggins, didn't necessarily mean 20-plus points or anything like that. He was averaging, I believe, 17 on the series for the Golden State Warriors. Well, he busted out in Game 5 and put up a really good number, 26, to lead the Golden State Warriors in scoring. Steph Curry struggled a bit. Klay Thompson had 21, and Jordan Poole played well. But listen, man, this is what happens sometimes. You need others to step in to help you win. We've seen it in the past where the role players make big shots, things of that nature. And in this particular case, Andrew Wiggins stepped up in a big way for the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, it's funny, not funny, but like we're talking about the 26, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing that really stood out to me was his 13 rebounds and, the defensive job he did on Jason Tatum, right? So, he had a quality all-around game, and it was, hey, like you say, role player step up. It's funny, we're calling him a role player, but he's an all-star, right? He made the all-star, but he still is essentially a role player on his team. But the one thing is, Curry, like you said, he had 16 points. He did have 8 assists, but he was 0 for 9 on threes.
Yeah,
0
wow.
for 9.
Yeah.
But the other guys stepped up. And the thing about it is, the thing about Wiggins is you kind of feel happy for the kid just because
Yeah.
of all the stuff he went through. Like, he was the first overall pick. They got him out of Boston. He goes to Minnesota. People are questioning his commitment, or not really his commitment, but his love for the game. And then he comes to a team in a situation where he's like essentially asked to just be a role player who can play D. And he turns out, one year he makes like gets, he's on the all defensive teams, and then the next year he's an all-star, and now he's starting to shine. And when the pressure isn't on him, he's starting to shine and show us some of the things that we thought he could do when he first was drafted. So you're happy for that guy, but it also goes to tell you how deep teams have to be in order to win a championship, because Steph Curry is the best player on the floor, but he's not always going to play that way. And you have a guy like Andrew Wiggins, coming and saving the day like he did yesterday.
And you talk about the 13 rebounds to go along with the 26 points. That's fantastic. Then you go to Gary Payton II, right? Coming back from that injury before the series started, wondering where he would be physically to help them out. He gives you 15 points. Now, that's, for me, that's even more unexpected. I've seen Andrew Wiggins drop 26. The 15 from Gary Payton II off the bench, that's a big-time bonus for them last night, especially when Steph Curry is struggling a bit. Others have to pick it up, be a little bit more aggressive and looking for potentially their offense and doing what they need to do. Then you get a regular solid Draymond Green game where he gives you around his averages of 8 points, 8 boards, and 6 assists in there, and doesn't let the emotions get too much of him. And I also have to give credit to Steve Kerr and the staff for the adjustment that they've made for, while Looney has been really good in this series, they have to bring him off the bench because it just helps him out, not having him and Draymond Green on the floor at the same time for a good amount of time. And especially with his rebounding and all, he does pretty well. Only 4 last night. Only 4 on Monday night. But he's playing his part. And Jordan Poole, 14 points in 14 minutes. That's what he does. He's a scorer. But to have Payton and Wiggins, but specifically Payton, and the fact that the 15 points, 15 rebounds in 26 minutes, a little unexpected for me. That's what you need. That's what happens when you have depth, to your point, on a championship team, a roster like this, where no one cares about their role. They just go out there and do their part. It called for Andrew Wiggins to step up last night. He did that. As a result, we have a Thursday game 6 where opportunity for the Golden State Warriors to close things out on the road.
Yeah, and when you look at it, this game, it wasn't exactly a pretty game. I mean, when you factor in how Boston, you look at Jalen Brown, he shot 2 for 11, right? Mm-hmm. He to start the game, he finished with 18 points on 5 for 18 shooting. He missed all 5 of his threes, right? Then you look at the Boston Celtics, they wound up shooting 11 of 32 from deep. They were sloppy in stretches. They committed 18 turnovers. But then you go ahead and you look at the Boston Celtics and you say to yourself, well, they shot the ball way better than the Celtics. The Celtics were 9 of 40 from behind the arc. And yes, we're raving over Wiggins, and he did have a phenomenal game, but he was 0 for 6. So, but like the two guys you talked about, Jordan Poole and Gary Payton, like these are two guys who like stepped up. And that's what has to happen. When things get murky and it's an ugly game and stars aren't really performing well, is up to who is going to be able to step up, like coming off the bench. Who's going to be able to do things like that? And it just seems like Golden State, they did. Their players did that. They did it. And, Peyton, what you said, with 15 off the bench and Poole with 14, that was, to me, that those two guys, along with Wiggins, are the reason why they won. And the reason why that both of us might be, our predictions may be false.
And I would love for it to be. I would love for it to be. Go Dubs. We got to thank everybody for making Locked On 76ers your first listen every day. On our next episode, we'll continue with some of the draft prospects and seeing who could potentially be there for the Sixers, who might be a good fit for this basketball team for the upcoming campaign. Now make your second listen Locked On NBA. We're Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NBA every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. Keith, as always, man, let the people know where they can find us.
You guys can find us wherever, like D said, you can subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts at. But if you want to get our Locked On 76ers YouTube channel podcast where you can see us, what you do is you go to YouTube, write in Locked On 76ers, and when you get onto the podcast, click the Liberty Bell. You click the Liberty Bell, you subscribe to us, you will get us, and you'll be able to follow us. Even you see when I make mistakes, right? You'll see that, right? But go ahead and do that today. But the main thing also, do yourself a favor and follow D on Twitter. Is at DivineG975, at DivineG975. And you can also follow me on Twitter at Pompey on Sixers. We'll keep you up with the latest 76ers coverage, and both of us, we having a great idea what's going on. So, do yourself a favor to listen to this podcast, watch this podcast, and follow us on Twitter.
We appreciate you guys. Keith, thanks, man. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right, bro. See you tomorrow.
You got it. Thanks, everybody.